Hello, hello, hello. How about that? Can you hear me now? I'll bet you the sound's a little better now. Can you hear me now? Hello. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I'm at my home live stream studio tonight, and I've got the microphone cut off. Sorry about that. All right. Oh, you're so sweet, Leanne. You make me feel so good. Hope everybody's doing well. Hi, Janera. Heba Heba. Etta. Good to see all of you. Maya. Hello. Camilla. Good to see you. Riley C. What's up, folks? I love you too, Leanne. I'm sorry you were feeling sad today. I hope you're feeling a little bit better now. I know I'm pretty sad too. Hey, what's up, Figueroa? Good to see you, my friend. Got a pretty good audience here tonight. Okay. Good to see you. Yes, I haven't placed the PowerPoint up on Blackboard because I just finished it a couple of minutes ago, but I'll have a study PowerPoint up on Blackboard probably 10 minutes after this meeting ends, okay? You know, I'm not sure what's going on, Leanne. Uh-oh. I'm not sure what's going on with you, Leanne. I'm sorry, though. Well, thank you very much. Okay, so do you folks want to go ahead and talk about the exam review the exam that we've got coming up? Now, this particular exam review sheet, the PowerPoint, has got a lot of slides. I included some extra stuff in there to kind of help you when you study. So hopefully, don't be, let me see, don't be intimidated when you see it. Okay. I'm trying to get my live chat going here. Okay. This is the main exam you're pumped for. Good, Leanne. I hope you do well on it. I hope you do well. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go through and talk about each of the chapters in the cumulative part of the exam. Okay, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. We have an exam. Nice joke, Riley. This PowerPoint, actually, no, this particular PowerPoint only has the cumulative stuff. This only has the cumulative stuff. We really only covered 3 chapters for the last exam. So really, there's not. Just basically go back and look at the old PowerPoints for the last 3 lectures. I want you to know how to diagnose, what a differential diagnosis is, the 3 characteristics that define what a psychological disorder is, maybe a little bit of information about mood disorders, bipolar disorders, and schizophrenia. Okay? But the cumulative stuff, let's go ahead and get started. This is chapter 1. Okay? And I'm going to try to go through all 45 of these pretty quickly, okay? So I do want you to know the 3 fathers of psychology. Remember, Gustav Fechner was the first to measure the mind. William James wrote the first textbook, and Wilhelm Wundt set up the first psych lab and gave out the first psych PhDs, okay? I know, right? It does feel like, feels like yesterday, and yet it feels like sometimes we were born in the middle of this semester, right? Okay, so I do want you to know that. Okay, now, other than those 3 fathers, I do want you to know the 3 important schools of thought that we talked about: psychoanalysis and Freud, behaviorism and B.F. Skinner, and cognitive. Do you remember those guys? And I'm not going to go over and talk about each of these slides, but I've included this in the study material so that you can look at it. Remember, you need to know a little bit about Freud and the psychoanalytic theory. You need to know a little bit about behaviorism and John Watson. We're going to talk about chapter 6, but I just want you to know the general idea behind John Watson's work, that the behavior shapes our environment. Remember, he was a contrast to eugenics, those people that thought that genes were that all behavior was determined by genes. Remember, John Watson sort of provided a contrasting viewpoint against that. And then okay, good question. Who's MEF 601? I do. I do. It's a cumulative exam, so it's going to cover all of these. Who's MEF 601? I don't recognize you. Jack, you're not trolling my class again, are you? Dude, come on. Come on. Okay, and then I do want you to know the cognitive perspective. Remember, what was the invention that spurred the cognitive perspective? Do you folks remember? Okay, computer. Very good, Etta. I am very impressed with you. Awesome, awesome, awesome. True. Hopefully, you wouldn't know about this one. Okay. And let's see. Memory, conscious. What are cognitive psychologists interested in? So I want you to know just a little bit. There's a table in chapter 1 about the research theoretical schools of thought, and I do want you to know Freud, behaviorism, and cognitive psychology. Okay, it's Aiden. Thank God, Aiden. I just didn't know if Jack was coming here to mess this up. Exactly. Freud and his sex. Good one, Leanne. Thank you. Man, you folks learned quite a bit this semester, I hope. I hope you learned some stuff. In talking to you over the course of the semester, it sounds like everybody's really kind of figured some stuff out. And you folks, based on the questions you've asked me and the things you've talked about, I feel like you folks have learned quite a bit. You're right, Leanne. You're right. Oh, Maya, listen to you kissing up to the teacher. Thank you. I always love the flattery. Just remember, flattery will get you everywhere. Okay, then do you remember we talked about the subfields of psychology, and I've been going back and over these every semester and every chapter. And when we get to a new chapter, I tell you this is the subfield for this chapter. This is the subfield for this chapter. This is the subfield for this chapter. On the exam, I reserve the right to ask you to identify example of each of these subfields of psychology. So I want you to know how a clinical psychologist is different from a social psychologist, how a social psychologist is different from a developmental psychologist, and all of these. Oh, thank you, Leanne. That's so sweet. If you remember when we talked about this in chapter 1, it probably didn't seem as clear to you, and the distinctions between these subfields probably weren't as clear as they are now. But since we've gone through this entire textbook and talked about each one of these subfields as the basis of an entire chapter, you're probably going to have an easier time identifying the different kinds of psychology subfields. But I do reserve the right. I'll probably have 4 or 5 questions related to these subfields, okay? Fair enough? Okay. So that's chapter 1. That's all I want you to know from chapter 1. I want you to know the 3 fathers of psychology, right? The 3 fathers of psychology. I want you to know the difference between the Freudian school of thought, the Watson school of thought with behaviorism, and George Miller and the cognitive school of thought. And then I want you to be able to identify examples of subfields of psychology. How long will the test be? Somewhere around 60 questions, 50 to 60 questions, Ed. It's not going to be super duper long. For example, I'll probably have 1 or maybe 2 questions on these subfields, and I'll test you on six or 7 of these subfields by making it a matching question. So it'll be match the subfield to the description kind of thing. All right, so probably 60 questions, mostly multiple choice and matching. Actually, all multiple choice and matching. It is my goal not to have any short answer questions on this test. I'm trying not to, Etta, but sometimes I make a mistake and put one on there. So while there are no guarantees about the short answer, I will not put very many of them if I do at all. 2,200 questions. Holy cow, that's a tough exam. You know, it's kind of funny you should mention that, Leanne. When I was a sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill, I took a political science class, and the final exam was 200 multiple choice questions. But this jerk off teacher had A through F, A, B, C, D, E, F. So it was 6 options per test. And you know, some of them were like A and not B, C plus D, E but not F on Tuesdays. It was a miserable exam. So I won't do that to you, but it'll be long enough to give you a fair test. I don't want to make it so that I've got too few questions, and if you don't know one thing, you fail the test. So I'll try to have it a medium number of questions, okay? And I am going to give you plenty of time to do it. Okay, do you remember Chapter 2? Chapter 2 is also going to be featured heavy on the exam. Remember, I do want you to know the difference between central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. What are the 2 structures that are in the central nervous system? The brain and the spinal cord. And these 2 things are control centers. The rest of the nerves in our body are called peripheral nerves. So the nerves that cause your heart to beat are in and around your heart are peripheral nerves. The nerves in your hand, the nerves that go down your legs are all peripheral nerves. And remember, those are controlled by your brain and your spinal cord. And remember, the spinal cord is responsible for reflex behavior. 1 hour a question. Did it really freeze? I don't feel like, it doesn't look like it's freezing on mine. Okay, cool. Not for all of us? Okay, good. User error then, user error. Okay, cool. Hi, Joy. How are you doing? I didn't see you come in. Spencer, good to see you too as well. All right, so Chapter 2. Then I do want you to know the anatomy of the neuron, the dendrites, the cell bodies, the axon, and the terminal buttons. I want you to know, of course, that neurotransmitters are released from terminal buttons. I want you to know that dendrites have little receptors that respond to these neurotransmitters, and I want you to know that the action potential is a brief pulse of electrical activity that travels down the length of an axon. And an axon is coated by this fatty tissue called myelin sheath, right? Oh, hi, Haley. I didn't see you. Of course, I'm not skipping over you. I love you, Haley. You're so sweet. You know I'm not trying to skip over you, dear. Oh, my goodness. Not at all. Okay, now for the review session, I gave you, I put each of the slides in here, so it makes it seem like a lot of slides, but each slide has the definition of the structure that I want. So there are 4 slides on the anatomy of a neuron, just to help you for the review session, okay? I do want you to know what a synapse is, right? And I do want you to know that that's where the neurotransmitter is released. Remember? And one of the things that happens is after these neurotransmitters send their message, some of them are reuptaken or taken back up into the terminal button. And do you remember on Thursday where I was talking about selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs? It's because they prevent this reuptake process from happening. And remember when I talked about the antidepressant called a monoamine oxidase inhibitor? Where it says remaining molecules are metabolized, they are metabolized by things like monoamine oxidase, okay, or acetylcholinesterase. These are the chemicals that clean up molecules. They're like the garbage men that sweep through the synapses. Yes, and an MAOI is a drug that inhibits a monoamine oxidase. So it prevents the monoamine oxidase from cleaning the synapse of drug molecules, of neurotransmitter molecules. Yes, good point. Okay. Now, for the exam, I reserve the right to ask you about these basic neurotransmitters: acetylcholine, norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, GABA. I probably won't ask you about glutamate. We don't talk about that much, and I probably won't talk about endorphins. Really? I did not know that. Spencer, you're not supposed to eat cheese, meat, or avocados. That's an interesting idea. I did not know that. I'll have to Google that because you piqued my interest, right? Okay, this is just another chart on how neurotransmitters work, just to help you in case you needed more information. I included some extra slides on this just to make sure that you had everything you needed to see. So you don't actually have to go back to the old PowerPoints. I tried to include everything that'll possibly be on the test from these PowerPoints. In fact, when I go through and create the exam, I'm going to use this PowerPoint as the guide for making my exam up. Okay? I reserve the right. Okay. And then I'm going to ask you about some different brain structures that we've talked about over the semester. Do you folks remember me talking about the cerebellum? Right? That's hopefully. I talked about the pons. Remember, the medulla is what controls your heart rate. Okay. Um, oh, wow. Wow. I forget the name of this syndrome, but I forget there's actually a syndrome that sometimes occur based on people who do, I think it's drug, no, it just brainstem damage. Some people actually lose the ability to breathe automatically, right? So when they fall asleep, they don't breathe and they need ventilators to help them breathe while they sleep. I was reading about this the other day. I forget the name of the disorder, but it occurs based on damage to the medulla oblongata, and these people actually forget to breathe at night. No, it's not sleep apnea. It's not obstructive sleep apnea. That's a great question, Maya, but it's not that. It's a completely different order. And sleep apnea, well, I think it's part of it's related to sleep apnea, but this disorder actually causes you just to quit breathing at all. Even if your oxygen levels go low, you don't wake up and take a breath. And these people actually can die while they sleep at night because they don't breathe. I got to find that disorder. I'll send y'all a link to it when I find it. Crazy. I know, right, Leanne? Isn't that a crazy disorder? So I do want you to know the pons, the medulla, and the cerebellum. And the substantia nigra, actually the substantia nigra is where dopamine is made. And people who have Parkinson's disorder, they have cell death in their substantia nigra, which means their brain doesn't generate the dopamine that it needs. That won't be on the exam, but that was an aside that I thought I would mention to you. But you will more than likely see pons, medulla, and cerebellum on the exam. I promise that. Okay, then we've got these different forebrain structures. I want you to know what the thalamus is. Remember, all of your senses except what go through the thalamus? Is it called central apnea? Smell. Very good, Camilla. You know what? I was actually reading an article about that, and if you look at rats, they don't have an amygdala, but they have this thing called a rhinencephalon, which is attached to their olfactory bulb, and it turns out that this rhinencephalon actually evolved into the amygdala. And so that's why it's directly connected to the olfactory lobe, because it's so much older than the other emotional processing, it was connected to emotional processing way before the other senses were. Okay, we've talked about the hippocampus a ton. You folks better know what the hippocampus is. We've talked about the amygdala even more. You better know what that's about, right? And then we talked about the hypothalamus, and that's the thing that motivates your behavior, motivates you to run away from things that scare you, motivates you to eat things when you're hungry, motivates you to drink water when you're thirsty. So I want you to know those structure. And the fusiform gyrus. I am so impressed that you know that, Leanne. I expect you to pop that out at a party sometime, all right? Impress your friends. Talk about the fusiform gyrus. Now, also, I do want you to know in general what the different structures in the frontal lobe, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and occipital lobe. Remember, in the frontal lobe, we have the prefrontal cortex, which is for impulse control, planning, executive functioning, and that's the part of the brain that you slice off with the with the prefrontal lobotomy. What they did with those ice picks is they go up there and they sever that prefrontal cortex away from the others. Remember, we got Broca's area there. And then you have, yes, you have the fusiform gyrus and those little face identifiers. Absolutely. I want you to know that the, let's see, that sensory cortex. And I want you to know that the occipital lobe contains the visual cortex. I know, right, Chris? And I may ask you a question about the motor cortex and the sensory cortex. Remember, the motor cortex initiates voluntary movement in all of your body parts, and your sensory cortex right behind that provides the conscious feeling for all of your body parts, okay? So when I move my arm, my right arm, my left motor cortex fires up. When somebody tickles me on my right arm, my left sensory cortex tells me that I'm being tickled. So I do want you to know those two structures, okay? And that's pretty much from chapter 2. Okay, so everybody's got that. So basically, what I want you to know is the parts of a neuron, how neurons communicate with one another at synapses. I want you to know the neurotransmitters that they communicate with. And then I want you to know brain parts. Okay? Chapter 3, sleeping and dreaming. You know what? The only thing I really want you to know from chapter 3 is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the pineal gland, and the pons. Those are 3 brain structures responsible for sleeping and waking. Remember, the suprachiasmatic nucleus is your timekeeper. It keeps you on a 24-hour cycle. If you destroy the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a person will lose all periodicity of sleeping and waking. They won't sleep for a set amount of time. They won't stay awake for a set amount of time. Their sleeping will be all over the place, just like an infant baby does, right? Now, the suprachiasmatic nucleus is tied to the sun, and that makes our period of sleeping align with the days and nights, okay, align with the sun. But as long as you have the suprachiasmatic nucleus, you will exist in a 24-hour cycle of sleeping and waking. If you destroy the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the 24-hour cycle will all go away. If you damage the band of axons that connects your eye to your suprachiasmatic nucleus, you'll still have that 24-hour cycle, but it won't be tied to the sun anymore. I know, Maya, and I'm not sure if anybody understands why we have this contralateral design. But it's kind of weird. If you think about it, our vision center is at the back of our head. I didn't mention this subtlety, but when we see objects, the objects bounce off the back of our eyeball before they're perceived by our rods and cones. So actually, in a sense, we're looking at things backwards and mirror image style. So it's kind of weird, Maya, how the whole brain is sort of opposite of the world in which it controls. I know, right? Pineal gland, that processes melatonin at night, which aids in the sleep process. I want you to know that the suprachiasmatic nucleus keeps the pineal gland quiet during the day. But when the sun goes down, your suprachiasmatic nucleus quits depressing the activity of the pineal gland. The pineal gland finally comes active and it starts generating melatonin, which aids in the sleep process. And I do want you to know that the pons is responsible for relaxing your muscles so you don't kick about while you're sleeping during REM sleep. Okay? My new fun word. Absolutely, Chris. It is absolutely. Actually, Chris, I would argue that our hearing also works in a way that radars work too. And that's all I want you to know from chapter 3. All right. Also, I don't have much from chapter 4 either. I want you to know what attachment is, and I want you to be familiar with Harry Harlow's monkey study, right? And he found, why do infants bond with their mothers? Is it because they are reinforced with food? I know, right? So what did Harlow find out? Did he why do infants love their mommies? Why do they want to be around their mommies? Is it because their mommies reinforce them by feeding them? Absolutely, Chris. It's more important than just food. It's creature comfort, right? Absolutely. What happens is the kid gets scared and that they don't know how to control their fear, their little amygdala. And by comforting themselves with their mom, they're able to calm down. When they calm down, they can engage in exploratory behavior. And remember, organisms learn when they explore. Exploration is a very important part of the learning process. That's sort of what I want you folks to do here. I try to keep you calm enough and make you like me and feel comfortable enough in this class that you explore the topic and learn something. If you constantly think your teacher's out to get you or your teacher's going to fire you, fail you, you're not going to be able to relax enough to explore and really learn anything about the topic. Absolutely, Riley, me too. Me too. Now, not only do I want you to know that, I want you to know the different attachment styles. Remember that famous experiment by Mary Ainsworth was called the strange situation experiment. And what she did was she brought the babies into the laboratory, she separated them from their mothers, and then she watched how easily they were able to reestablish attachment. Remember, little babies are born with two very normal fears, stranger anxiety and separation anxiety. You know, that happens a lot, Chris. And you know what? That happened to me when I was in college. You can't learn from a teacher that's a total prick. You know what I mean? You lose all motivation, all interest in the topic, and it just makes for a horrible semester. I do apologize for that. I hate it when that happens. Well, you know what, Leanne? You will have gained so much confidence and so much power from this class and so much understanding of what's going on that you're going to be better able at fighting through the fear, Leanne. I promise, I promise, I promise. See, Ron, I did set the bar high. I'm out there raising it up there, baby. I hope all my teachers catch up to me sometime. Okay, and that's really all I want you to know from chapter 4. We're just going to focus on the attachment stuff. Harry Harlow's monkey, what attachment is, and the two normal anxieties that little kids have during the first 2 or 3 years of life. And I do want you to know the 3 attachment styles. Okay? Chapter 5. Also, fairly easy, fairly easy. I reserve the right, Riley, lawyer Roddenberry again. I may ask you what lobe of the brain each of the sensory cortices is in. So the olfactory and the gustatory, so smell and taste, are in your frontal lobe. Hearing is in your temporal lobe. Touch is in your parietal lobe. And vision is in your occipital lobe. So I will probably ask you to know that. No, I am not going to have hotspot questions on the final exam. Good question, Leanne. No, I'm not going to ask you to recognize them by sight. The hotspot questions turned out to be kind of disastrous. I had lots of students with problems because they weren't clicking the right parts. So I just decided I don't need that kind of hassle in my life, man. I know, they killed me too. Okay. And then I'm going to ask you the questions about visions. I'll ask a couple of general questions about the difference between rods and cones. Um, I want you to know the superior colliculus. Remember, your hands are your eyes are tied to your other senses. I can see my coffee cup, and my eyes can direct my hand to pick up my coffee cup. You don't think that's very difficult, but it requires that your two senses coordinate themselves together. Your eyes and your motor cortex. And so that happens in the superior colliculus. It coordinates your vision to your other senses. If you hear a sound over here, your eyes know where to look. And that's because your ears are tied to your eyes via the superior colliculus. Okay? I do want you to know that. So that's all I really want you to know from chapter 5. Where the sensory cortices are, what the difference between rods and cones, and I might ask you a question about the optic chiasm or the superior colliculus. Okay. And that really represents the biological part of this class, all the brain areas, neurotransmitters, areas of the brain, sensory cortices, vision, all that stuff. Now we're getting into sort of more of the mental side of psychology. Actually, you know, folks, in high schools, psychology is taught as a year-long class. And usually the way they do it in high schools is the first half of the semester, the first semester are all of the biological topics of psychology: sensation and perception, biopsych, sleeping and dreaming, stress and stress reduction, all those things that relate to the brain and nervous system. And then usually the second semester is nothing but mental kinds of stuff. Okay? Mental side is you like that the best. Good for you. Well, good. I'm glad you liked the conditioning chapter. Most students hate that, Leanne. I'm glad you liked it. Okay, so in chapter 6, I do want you to know how to identify the parts of a classically conditioned response. I want you to know the difference between an unconditioned stimulus and an unconditioned response. I want you to know the difference between a conditioned stimulus and a conditioned response. Chris, let's go ahead and figure out why you hated your math class using classical conditioning. So you said that when you went into class, your teacher was a total prick. Your teacher being a total prick and you not liking them. What parts of the classical conditioned response were those? What was your teacher being a jerk? What was that? That was the what? I'm going to see if anybody can type that in. Oh my goodness, I've stumped. Oh crap, Leanne got it. Damn it. Good one. That was the environmental cue. That was the unconditioned stimulus. When people are mean to you, you don't need to learn how not to like that, right? That just happens. That's the unconditioned stimulus. And you not liking the teacher is called the what? This is your chapter. It's my jam. Okay, I'll make the whole exam about this chapter, Leanne, help you out. The UCR, fantastic. Now, math class. You walked into a math class. What part of the classical conditioning was that? I'm still waiting. Let's see. That is the conditioned stimulus. Exactly. And because math was associated with that jerk-off teacher, you decided you didn't like math. So your resultant attitude towards math is called the... And I know you know it, there's only one left. It's the conditioned response. And I know Riley, Leanne, and Chris, you are all going to type that in. But that's sort of how that works. And that's why I think it's really important for me, at least, to be nice and funny, because I want you to like psychology as much as I do. Everybody comes into my class not knowing if they're going to like psychology. So I laugh, tell jokes, and make it interesting. And hopefully the positivity that you feel towards me washes over onto psychology, right? Why is it the CS? Because you don't necessarily hate math. You don't hate math. The first time you took math, Leanne, you did not hate it. You learned to hate it because it was associated with other bad things. Okay, Kimia, well, if you want to have If anybody wants to sit down and talk about this one-on-one or in a small group, I'd be more than happy to meet you in teams and walk you through 100 examples if I could do that. You were probably overthinking it. You know, the weird thing about classical conditioning is it makes completely good sense until I start adding labels to the parts of it. Then people usually, it blows their mind. It's actually something that's very simple that we make difficult by labeling it. Okay, let's see. I do want you to know John Watson and little Albert. I will probably not ask you about generalization, but I will ask you to know who little Albert was. I think it definitely is what makes the class interesting, Maya. You have to learn how to tell a story. All good teaching follows a narrative form. It has a story, a beginning, a middle, an end, and a point. A lot of teachers forget that you have to give students a point. They have to understand why you're working towards a given outcome. If you just come in and just start reading off PowerPoints without understanding how A ties to B ties to C, it's really hard for students to learn, I've found. I know. Teaching's not as easy as people say. It's one thing to know something. It is an entirely different thing to teach that. And that's what I learned when I was a young student in graduate school. I knew everything. I just didn't know how to convey it in such a way that my students were interested and learned something about it. But teachers can develop. Hopefully your other teachers will do a good job for you too. Okay. So, I do want you to know reinforcers and punishers, right? Reinforcers cause a behavior to occur more frequently, and punishers cause a behavior to occur less frequently. Okay? You need to know that. I didn't really want to put this question on the exam, but it's one of the common exam questions that we all have to use. So I want you to know that a reinforcer is an outcome that makes a behavior more likely in the future, and a punisher is an outcome that makes a behavior less likely in the future. Yeah, I know. These are kind of, again, this is the whole point of behaviorism is as soon as you start labeling these things that we all intuitively understand, for some reason it gets confusing. And I remember as an introductory student, and actually I even took an advanced class called Learning as a junior at UNC Chapel Hill, and I was confused the whole damn semester. And it sort of took a while to sort of figure these things out in my brain. Now you're talking my language. Okay, so be sure to know these and be sure to know the difference between a positive and a negative reinforcer. Okay, that's all I want you to know from Chapter 6. Chapter 7 is cognitive psychology. I might ask you the old computer question, right? So the thing that kind of set off the cognitive revolution was the invention of the computer. It was a machine that could think. And suddenly, all those behaviors who said that human brains didn't have programs that systematically process things had to eat their words because somebody had invented a machine that could systematically think. So of course we had to accept the fact that human brains process information in a systematic manner. Okay. Now on the test, I will probably ask you about the sensory memory, the short-term memory, and the long-term memory. Remember, the sensory memory is where things go before you're aware of them. And that gives you just a little extra time to decide what it is you're going to pay attention to. When you are paying attention to something, it is in your short-term memory. But your short-term memory is very small. It can only hold 7 chunks, plus or minus 2. I don't know if you remember Miller's magic number, right? And I told you that you can increase the size of your short-term memory by learning how to chunk information together. Do you remember that, chunking? All right, fantastic. And then the long-term memory is where information goes when you're not using it. So I'll bet each and every one of you knows who the first president of the United States was. Oh my God, George Washington just popped up into my mind. Holy cow, where was it? It was in my long-term memory, right? Who was at your 8-year-old birthday party? Oh my goodness, I remember her name was Sissy. Oh my God, she was so cute. I was in love with her at my 8th grade birthday party. I'll never forget that memory. I hadn't thought about her until I just pulled her up just like that, right? Not Sissy, it was Stacy. And I'm not going to tell you her last name, but I do remember that too. I looked her up on Facebook. My heart wasn't into her as much as it was when I was an 8-year-old. Schemas to storage. Dang, Etta, yes, we do use schemas to store. Now, the problem is sometimes these schemas have information that wasn't actually in the memory. Remember that? We put that stuff in, right? Schema consistent things. So I might imagine that I had a birthday cake at my 8-year-old party. Maybe I didn't. Maybe my parents served cupcakes. But my schema is that birthday parties always have birthday cakes, right? Yeah, Stacy's mom has got it going on. You are so funny tonight. And just to help you, I just put this up here. There's a chart in chapter 7 which sort of tells you about the sensory memory, the short-term memory, and the long-term memory. You can look at this chart to kind of help you if you need any more information. But these two charts right here should kind of give you an idea. All I want you to do is to know these three parts of the short-term memory. I want you to know Miller's magic number and chunking too. I reserve the right to ask you about those. It is a classic. Okay. Oh, and then the other thing I do want you to know, remember we talked about the hippocampus. Memories aren't actually stored there, but they are processed through there. If you have damage to the hippocampus, everything you learned before, like who George Washington is, you will remember, but you won't be able to stick new memories in your brain. Do you folks remember that? And it's tied to your amygdala, which helps you to know what's important to memory, to remember. Those things that create an emotional impact on you, you will remember. Like when you heard Stacy's mom's got it going on, Leanne, it made you laugh because it's the most ridiculous song ever. And because you laughed and had an emotional impact to that song, it helped your hippocampus process that song, so that when I said my old girlfriend was Stacy, not old girlfriend, she never had anything to, I was too afraid to ask her. I was freaking 8, right? But when I mentioned Stacy, that made you think of that particular song, and that's because you memorized that song. And remember, your cerebellum is where well-learned memories go, right? Oh, the more vivid the experience, the better we remember. Yes, absolutely. And that's because our brain has evolved to remember images, not words. Images that we've seen have been around for millions of years. As long as we've had eyes, we've had visual images. But language is very, very new. It's just been invented a couple thousand years ago. And your brain has not evolved to store things as words. Instead, they store them as images, like faces in your fusiform gyrus. Good point, Etta. Etta is a genius. I swear to God, she is showing off all over the place tonight. I'm so proud of you, Etta. Okay, chapter 8. I got one thing I want you to know. The only thing I want you to know from this class is the difference between a test of aptitude and a test of achievement. And what I want you to remember, Chris, is that if you fail your math test, it does not mean you are a dumb person. Because a math test in Math 171 is a test of achievement. It's a test of a body of knowledge that you should have put in your brain. That's different from your aptitude, which is your ability to learn. And you know what I see a lot of times? I see a lot of students that come into to my world, and they're in community college because they haven't done well in school because somebody turned them off to education a long time ago, and they don't want to learn, so they don't study for the tests and they don't make good grades. But if you dig down deep enough, you find out that these students are actually very clever and they have a great ability to learn and a great aptitude. And so my job is to get you fired up enough so that you can use that aptitude, that ability to learn, right? So do you folks remember the difference between aptitude and achievement? So I will ask you to tell me whether or not this test is an aptitude or an achievement test, and you're going to have to know. So if I say the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, ASVAB, since I called it an ASVAB, an Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, you know it's an IQ test, right? It is not a test of achievement. Okay, that's all I want you to know from Chapter 8. Chapter 9, I may ask you one or two general questions about the theories of motivation. We talked about satisfaction of needs. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Etta, you have a high need for achievement. I can tell Etta has to make good grades. Wait a minute, Joy, are you still here? Joy Ratzman, are you hiding in the back somewhere? Joy Ratzman has more need for achievement than any human being I've ever seen, man. She is focused. Holy cow, there you go, Joy. Her need for achievement kills me sometimes, I'm telling you. She is definitely a joy to teach. Okay, and then we talked about optimal need for arousal. Remember, we all hate being bored, but we all hate being overwhelmed. We all want our level of arousal to be somewhere in the middle. Remember that? Okay. Drive reduction. Remember that hunger is largely driven by drive reduction. You get these chemicals in your stomach, these hormones in your stomach that cause you to experience the feeling of hunger. You eat, and that makes that feeling of hunger go away, so you reduce the drive. Exactly, right? Joy wants to achieve. That she does. And it's been a pleasure to know you for a whole year, Joy. I absolutely love your crazy need for achievement. And I hope the rest of you can cultivate that, because that drive certainly helps you in school and in life in general too. Okay, let's see. Emotions. I just want you to know the three parts of the brain that are responsible for the processing of emotion: the amygdala, the temporal lobes, and the frontal lobes, right? Okay, so your temporal lobes have memories which have emotional content. They activate your amygdala, which is your quick emotional response. And then we moderate our emotional response with our frontal lobe. So the reason that little babies cry is because their frontal lobe hasn't myelinated and it doesn't control the functioning of their amygdala. If their amygdala tells them they're sad, a little baby starts crying. However, those of you who are sitting here with me tonight, sometimes your amygdala will tell you you're sad, but your frontal lobe will say, dude, you're just disappointed, relax, no need to cry. So your frontal lobe moderates your emotional functioning. Okay? I hope that makes sense. Chapter 10, Sex and Gender. You know what? The only thing I want you to know from this is the difference between primary and secondary sex characteristics. Okay? Primary sex characteristics are those characteristics related to reproduction. So, your testes, a penis, a vagina, your ovaries, those are primary sex characteristics, and your secondary sex characteristics are those characteristics that come along later that make us look like males look like adult males or adult females. The broadening of the shoulder for men and the narrowing of the hips, the hourglass shape for ladies, the breasts, the underarm hair, the pubic hair, those are secondary sex characteristics, okay? We're totally skipping chapter 11. And chapter 12, I want you to know the difference between normative and informational influence. I want you to know Solomon Ash's line judging study and Stanley Milgram's shock learning study and the Latané and Darley's bystander. No, you know what? Actually, I'm not even going to ask you about that one. Stanley Milgram's shock learning study, Solomon Ash's line judging study, and which one is normative and which one is informational. Does that make sense? Okay. Sweet. You have those studies in sociology. Yep. Some of these studies, especially in the social psych chapter, you're going to hear some of that stuff in sociology. And then you might hear some of the stuff from chapter 2 in your biology class too. Okay. Why are we skipping chapter 11? I don't know, Maya. I just felt like I have enough stuff. You know what I mean? I tried to cut it down and I honestly don't know. I just decided not to put it in there. Would you like for me to put some questions in there? Some secret questions and not tell you about them? Maybe I could do that. Okay, good enough. Well, that's all I really had for the review session tonight. I didn't really plan anything for the last 3 chapters to talk about anything, but on Friday night, on Sunday night, I will also include a short little statement about the last 3 chapters, okay? And that'll be the first part of Sunday night's recording. So those of you who are here tonight, you can just go back and watch the first 10 minutes of the review that I'm going to have on Sunday night, and you can get all that information, okay? 13, 14, and 15 are on the final exam. Yeah, and honestly, the Kahoot quizzes that you've done, I'm probably going to ask on those 3 chapters, I'm probably going to ask 20 or so questions on those 3 chapters, probably 7 to 8 questions a chapter. So honestly, the Kahoot quizzes are probably going to be very, very similar to the questions that I ask on the last 3 chapters. Absolutely. You know what? If you want, see, I didn't know if some people might not want their names. Yeah, I'm not sure what, it looks like 6-foot Leah. I'm not exactly sure what that meant. If you want, Leah, you could tell me what SXFT Leah means. Soft Leah. You think C-Rod is Weewa. You know what? I'm going to send a text to Weewa and see if she will let me, see if that person will let me unmask them next week. So if you're in the top 20, please send me your okay. I would like to unmask at least the top 20 players so that everybody knows who the winners were. And whoever's number 1, I would like for you to send me a picture so I can put it on Blackboard so that everybody can see your pretty face, whoever you are. I don't know. I'm not sure, Leanne, but if you want to tell me who you are, I would be more than happy to. Of course not, Haley. We all know freaking women are smarter than men. What are you talking about? Just kidding. Just kidding. You won't know. Actually, you won't know till Sunday night. I'm going to spend all day Monday finishing up that game, getting the winners list, getting the extra credit awarded, and I'm probably even going to record a short video to send around for the end of the contest. You can unmask YouTube. You know what? Screw it. I'm just going to unmask everybody. I've been sending you around the Excel spreadsheet that I send around does not include last real names. It just includes aliases. Maybe I'll send you the teachers one around with the names. How about that? So you can find out who everybody is. You can see who their alias is and who they really are. How about that? Okay, I'll definitely do that then. All right, folks, thank you very much. I've had a great evening. I hope you feel like you're prepared a little bit for the final exam. It'll be available Monday morning at 6 a.m. and you have all week to finish that exam. Please get it done by Friday night at 11:59 p.m. And of course, as always, if you need help, do not hesitate to send me a text or an email, okay? You folks good? Well, thank you very much. I thought you were the best students ever. Every semester, my students impressed the hell out of me, and you folks were no exception. You were interesting, you were thoughtful, you had great questions. Honestly, I think Wake Tech students are some of the coolest students around, and I just have a great time meeting all of you. You know what? I'm going to try to get it done Monday. It probably won't, maybe it won't come till Wednesday, but I'm going to try to get it done quickly so that we can all have a week to enjoy the end of the competition and celebrate the winners. It was good to meet you. Finals week doesn't start until Thursday? Eh, well, my class is over on Sunday night, so I'm going to go ahead and start the exam early. What do you think about that? I'm glad you did. Sometimes I break the rules. Joy. All right, folks. Y'all take care. I'm going to go downstairs and get myself another cup of coffee and start working on this exam. Y'all have a great night. Take care, and I will see you next week. Bye.